Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 8, Chapter 3, Text 1. Shri Badarayani Ruvacha Evam Vyavasito Buddhya Samadhaya Manorudhi Jajapa Paramam Japyam Pragjanmanya Anushikshitam. Shri Badarayani Ruvacha Evam Vyavasita Buddhya Samadhaya Manorudhi Jajapa Paramam Japyam Pragjanmanya Anushikshitam. Shri Badarayani Ruvacha Evam Vyavasita Buddhya Samadhaya Manorudhi Jajapa Paramam Japyam Pragjanmanya Anushikshitam. Yes. Shri Badarayana Ruvacha Evam Vyavasito Buddhya Samadhaya Manohridhi Yajapa Paramam Japyam Pragjanmanya Anushikshitam. Shri Badarayani Ruvacha Evam Vyavasito Buddhya Samadhaya Manohridhi Japa Paramam Japyam Pragjanmanya Anushikshitam. Shri Badarayana Ruvacha Evam Vyavasito Buddhya Samadhaya Manohridhi Japa Paramam Japyam Pragjanmanya Anushikshitam. Word for word translation. Shri Badarayani Ruvacha Shukdev Goswami said. Evam does. Vyavasitaha fixed. Buddhya by intelligence. Samadhaya for concentration. Manaha the mind. Hridhi in consciousness or in the heart. Jajapa he chanted. Paramam the supreme. Japyam mantra he had learned from great devotees. Prak Janmani in his previous birth. Anushikshitam practiced. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Shri Shukdev Goswami continued, thereafter the king of the elephants Gajendra fixed his mind in his heart with perfect intelligence and chanted a mantra which he had learned in his previous birth as Indradyumna and which he remembered by the grace of Krishna. Such remembrance is described in Bhagavad Gita 6:43-44. Tatra tam buddhi samyogam labhate paurvadehikam yatate cha tato bhuyah samsiddhau kuru nandana purvabhyasena tenaiva riyate yavashopi saha. In these verses, it is assured that even if a person engaged in devotional service falls down, he is not degraded, but is placed in a position in which he will, in due course of time, remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As explained later, Gajendra was formerly King Indradyumna, and somehow or other, in his next life, he became king of the elephants. Now Gajendra was in danger, and although he was in a body other than that of a human being, he remembered the stotra he had chanted in his previous life. Yatate chitato bhuyah samsiddhau kuru nandana. To enable one to achieve perfection, Krishna gives one the chance to remember him again. This is proved here. For although the king of the elephant, Gajendra, was put in danger, this was a chance for him to remember his previous devotional activities so that he could immediately be rescued by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is imperative, therefore, that all devotees in Krishna consciousness practice chanting some mantra. Certainly, one should chant the Hare Krishna mantra, which is the Maha Mantra or great mantra. And also, one should practice chanting Chintamani Prakarasadmashu, the Narsimha Stotra. Ito Narsimha, Parato Narsimha, Yato Yato Yami, Tato Narsimha. Every devotee should practice in order to chant some mantra perfectly, so that even though he may be imperfect in Krishna consciousness in this life, in his next life he will not forget Krishna consciousness, even if he becomes an animal. Of course, a devotee should try to perfect his Krishna consciousness in this life, for simply by understanding Krishna and his instructions, after giving up this body, one can return home back to Godhead. Even if there is some fall down, practice of Krishna consciousness never goes in vain. For example, Ajamil in his boyhood practiced chanting the name of Narayan under the direction of his father. But later in his youth, he fell down and became a drunkard, woman hunter, rogue and thief. Nonetheless, because of chanting the name of Narayan for the purpose of calling his son, whom he had named Narayan, he became advanced, even though he was involved in sinful activities. Therefore, we should not forget the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra under any circumstances. It will help us in the greatest danger, as we find in the life of Gajendra. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. My dear Lord, please guide us all so that we can awaken to the reality of your mercy and your love. Hare Krishna. So, I'm grateful to be here with all of you today. This visit has worked out very unexpectedly. And, I know several of you, at least some of you from IIT Kharagpur and my college preaching days. Those college preaching times seem to be like almost another lifetime for me. It's from 1996 onwards till about 2007, 2008 I was quite actively involved in college outreach. Then 2014 onwards I've been traveling abroad. So it's as compared to the college outreach where we focus on young men who mainly become brahmacharis or dedicated grahasthas. My Western outreaches, when I first went to America, They asked where I had come from. So I told that I came from Chowpatty, Pune. Yeah, we have about 150 brahmacharis each place. They told me, in both North America and South America combined, we don't have 150 brahmacharis. So there is a very different dimension. So it's wonderful to be here. You have a beautiful temple, a very scenic place. I'm happy to be here, and among the many devotees from IIT KGP, I remember Ekbari was one of the most intellectual. We have a lot of questions, and had a lot of healthy skepticism, which was good. It made me question my answers also, and so it's nice to be here again. So today we are discussing the pastime of Gajendra, and I will broadly talk on the topic of one of the biggest mysteries on the spiritual path, that is how spiritual awakening occurs. That now when we share Krishna Bhakti with others, so many people come but only few wake up, few take up. So why is it? And some people may take up not at that time but 5 years later, 10 years later. And some people, they come searching, and even if we are not interested, they are interested. So that's the topic I'll discuss. And generally when I take a Bhagavatam class, I use a 3-point framework. I call it Chit. We want to expand our consciousness. So C is context, what is happening. I is insight, and then T is takeaway. So as you can notice, I am writing and drawing certain things. So let's look at the context of what is happening. The context is that we are now coming toward the climax of the Gajendra pastime. This is among the 12 cantos of the Bhagavatam. Anyone knows how many chapters are there in the Bhagavatam totally? Yeah, 330 chapters are there. 330 chapters. So out of these, the 10th canto is the largest canto. It has not only 90 chapters, also almost 1/3 in terms of the entire Bhagavatam's length. So we are before this in the 8th canto. And in the 8th canto, there is a story being told. The story is of the elephant Gajendra. And the remarkable thing over here is that Gajendra, if we consider his life, it was at a plateau. Plateau, we could say plateau means what? That he was in a materially powerful position. And he was the king of elephants, he was living in luxury and royalty and pomp. And then suddenly he found himself in a materially powerless position. Out of nowhere, utterly unexpectedly, he was caught by the crocodile. And when he was caught by the crocodile, he thought, I am the king of elephants, what can this crocodile do? He thought, I'll just shake it off. Tried to shake it off, and he just couldn't. Many times people, or even we, start developing some unhealthy habit, maybe spending too much time on the phone or surfing the net or gossiping. We think, okay, this is just a minor thing, I'll give it up anytime. But it just catches us. There's a British writer, Oscar Wilde, he said that giving up smoking is the easiest thing in the world. I have done it over 100 times. So I gave up smoking, but he did not give me up. So it was very difficult for him to recognize and accept that I am powerless. I just can't do anything. And he kept fighting. He thought this crocodile will weaken, but it just didn't weaken. And then it is in this state of material powerlessness that he was there. From there, he rose to the state of spiritual awakening. And rather, through the spiritual awakening, it also happens, in one sense we could say, the spiritual awakening happens almost instantaneously. So there is, he comes to a state of spiritual power, that is power coming from our connection with Krishna, from our realization of our spirituality. So this spiritual awakening that happened for him, that spiritual awakening will be expressed in this chapter through the prayers. And in this particular verse is the transition, that the incidents that are happening, so if in a movie is going on, sometimes an incident is happening, and then there may be not a movie where a drama is there. In a drama, often Sutradhar is there, the narrator is there. Okay, this has happened, now this is going to happen. So they explain what is happening, what the scene transition is happening. So like that here, we are taking a step back from the incident, and Shukdev Goswami is describing, okay, what change is happening over here. So he is telling that he remembers. Prak janmanya anushikshitam. Now there is no word to specifically talk about remembrance over here. Anushikshitam. Shikshitam. Shikshitam means shiksha is to learn or to teach. Somebody gives shiksha. Shikshita is, so the shishya through shiksha becomes shikshita. Shikshita is actually the nearest word that comes to educated or literate. So anushikshitam means one who has systematically learned. Prag janmani, in the previous life, one who has systematically learned. So evam vyavasita buddhya. So let's look at the 4 lines of this verse. So if we consider A, B, C and D. So the last line is what we talk about, prag janmanya anushikshitam. So past life practice. So what he had done in the past life practice, that is what he took shelter in. What? Evam vyavasita buddhya. Evam vyavasita buddhya. So with clear intelligence, with fixed intelligence. Where does a word like vyavasita buddhya come in the Bhagavad Gita? Something similar? Yes, vyavasayatmika buddhi. What does that mean there? One-pointed intelligence, concentrated intelligence. Vyavasayatmika. So vyavasita buddhya. So we could say, Prabhupada calls it at one place as, I think we call this perfect intelligence, steady intelligence. So what happens is, when we are in anxiety, our intelligence also becomes unsteady. Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do that? Should I do that? And then finally we decide, this is what I am going to do. So that is a steadying of the intelligence. If somebody is sick and they are not able to find out, or they are not able to figure out what treatment to take. This is one of the biggest problems I have seen when devotees become sick, is that there are too many advisors. Try this, try that, try this, try that. And this has become a big problem, especially when devotees become elderly. Right now there is one spiritual master who is very severely sick, and he is not able to, he's not cognitively, he's not exactly in the coma, but he's not in the cognitive state to take decisions. And the disciples are fighting with each other, what treatment should the spiritual master have? So now there is a proposition that normally, in outside circles also it happens, that it's something like a power of attorney. Who will take medical decisions on your behalf if you are not medically fit to take decisions. So there is a recommendation that, the GBC is making a recommendation that you should, all senior devotees should clearly write it down. Who should be there, who has the power of execution on their behalf. But the point is that at that time, when we don't know what to do, there is a lot of unsteadiness. But at least this is what I am going to do. So steady intelligence. Evam vyavasita buddhya. Whether it will work or what work, we don't know. So it's like generally when we talk about anxiety or agitation. Anxiety, it comes from when there is a problem, something. But it comes from two sources. Not knowing, problem is, I don't know the cause, I don't know the cure. So if we consider anxiety that is there in our life, that is the cause known or unknown, and is the cure known or unknown. So if you consider 4 quadrants like this, Where do you think will be the most anxiety? Yeah, the second quadrant is the worst anxiety. I don't know what is wrong and I don't know what to do about it also. It's a feeling of crushing powerlessness. Now, if you see, sometimes there are many diseases which are called as idiopathic diseases. In medicine, idiopathic means you don't know the cause of the disease, but you know the cure. So, in many ways, okay, you got cancer. I don't know why you got the cancer. Everybody has their pet theory of why somebody got cancer. Oh, you used too much mobile. Oh, you got too much pollution. You ate polluted food. This, that. Nobody knows for sure this is the cause. But at least I know the cure. This is the cure. So, relatively speaking, the most anxiety will be when we don't know the cure or the cause. When will we have the least anxiety? Yeah, when both are known. When both the cause and the cure are known, the least anxiety will be there. Now, if you consider the cause known, cure unknown, or cause unknown, cure known, which is a better situation?
Cure known. Cause.
Yeah. So, there are almost like 3,000 diseases which there is no treatment for them. The doctor can diagnose the disease, now just die peacefully or just live. You cannot do anything about the disease. Sometimes some diseases cannot be cured, they can only be managed, and some diseases cannot even be managed. They are so degenerative that way. So the point is that sometimes palliative care is offered. That all that we can do is minimize the pain and the discomfort because of this. So we could say, if in terms of cause known, cure unknown, this is bad, and cure known, cause unknown, it's at least good, something I can do. So, evam vyavasita buddhya. So, when Gajendra studied his mind, so he is in which quadrant now? What do you think?
He knows cure.
Yeah. Now, cause, how will this crocodile become so powerful? I am the king of elephants. How has this got such a grip on me? And how is it not tiring? I am getting tired. So, he at least gets to, whether it's quadrant 4 or quadrant 3. There's no description of how that crocodile became so powerful. Now later on, when the Lord comes and kills the crocodile, then that crocodile is also revealed to be a celestial being. That's how it has some extraordinary power. So Gajendra at least comes to this quadrant. Evam vivasita buddhya samadhaya manorudhi. So with intelligence, what did he do? Samadhaya manorudhi. Now this combination of words, mano and rudhi, it's a very interesting combination. Now in the anatomy of a person, anatomy of the self, there is no such thing as the heart. When we say you broke my heart, that does not mean, okay, let me do X-ray to see if your heart is broken. I will take an axe and break your head now. You think like that, isn't it? So when we use the word heart, what are we referring to? It actually comes in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita also. Sarvadvarani samyamya rudhi mano nishtitam. What is that? Sarvadvarani samyamya. So the idea of the mind and the heart coming together. Prayana kale manasa chalena. Yeah. Sarvadvarani samyamya mano rudhi nirudhya cha. Let's recite this verse. Sarvadvarani samyamya manorudhi nirudhya cha murdhya adhayatmanah pranam astito yogadharanam. So this is also, the idea is that the mind, it wanders in many different places. So when we place the mind in the heart, mano rudhi nirudhya cha. So what does it mean? Now we know the mind is a thing. Bhumirapo nalo vayu kham mano buddhirevacha. But what is this rudhi? Where is this rudhi? This place the mind in the heart. So this is a curious phrase, but it comes at many places in the scripture. So the way to understand it is that our mind is basically our consciousness or our conscious awareness. Because Where our mind is, that is what we are aware of. That's where our conscious awareness is. And heart refers to basically the object of greatest value, that which we consider our treasure. So, yam yam vapi smaran bhavam, ya antakale cha mameva, smaran muktva kalevaram. So, the idea is that our thoughts can go to various directions, and sometimes we are thinking, oh, this person spoke like this, and that happened over there, and this I did like this. Our thoughts go here and there. But then, hey, that's not all that important. This is important right now. So if tomorrow I have an exam, or in 1 hour I have an exam, a student has an exam, they say, forget it, now studies is most important. That's what I need to focus on. So often our mind wanders in various places, but sometimes we consciously focus it on what matters the most. Now this can happen when there is some anxiety is there, some trouble is there, some jolt comes. So we might just be skating through life, and then suddenly somebody gets a diagnosis. They might be in big trouble. They might live only for a short while. Then okay, what really matters? So mano ruddhi niruddhyacha. So that theme is that with our consciousness we bring our mind to where we need it to be. Go back, no, it won't. So Murdhya, so Jajapa Paramam Japyam. So Manorudhi, Samadhaya Manorudhi. Samadhaya means to make it steadily fixed. And then once he did that, then something mysterious is happening. Jajapa Paramam Japyam. He chanted. Now here Prabhupada is using the word mantra in a very inclusive sense, because he is not chanting one mantra in a sense. Often we use the word mantra to refer to something which is chanted repeatedly. He is chanting a series of prayers, and there is no description or reference in any of the Acharya's commentaries that he repeats any of these prayers again and again. Now when we are talking about, so Prabhupada says prag janmani anushikshitam. He had learned in the previous life and he now fixes it. So we are going back here. So he studied his intelligence, then mind on the heart. He fixed his mind or heart means his thoughts, he focused on his attention, he focused on that which is the most important thing. And then jajapa paramam japyam, and then he prayed, he chanted. So now he prayed what he had remembered in the previous life. Now if we look at the prayers that are composed, there is a number of prayers that are quite contextual, where he is talking about, for example, that I am caught in this pash. That this, he doesn't necessarily use the word that the crocodile has caught me, but I am caught in this pash. And so it's unlikely that in a previous life Gajendra as Indradyumna had memorized exactly the same prayer, and then he offered the same prayer. Because there is some context. See, when we say Krishna says that I spoke the message of the Bhagavad Gita to Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ahamovyam. So now did he speak the exact same message? Well, no. When Krishna spoke to a sun god, he will not say Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ahamovyam. Isn't it? There is a core that will be the same, but apart from that core, there will be a lot that will be different. It's contextual also. So the point is this remembrance. So that remembrance that came need not be a specific remembrance of a particular mantra. It is the remembrance of the Lord, or rather we remember to remember the Lord. That we remember to remember the Lord at that particular point. That is what pops up in many different ways. So this is the context that I discussed, and that I'm moving out to this is what the verse is saying. He remembered and recited a mantra based on a practice from his previous life. So this spiritual awakening, so let's move to the I part now, the insights. How does this remembrance occur? So I'll talk about 4 factors using an acronym called GOLD. So generally when anything happens, in logic, that is called ekamulik nyaya and bahumulik nyaya, single factor analysis and multi-factor analysis. So that means when something happens, many people, they focus on one factor. So somebody say, oh, why is somebody preaching so successful? Purity is the force. Well, yes, that is true. But was Prabhupada not pure when he was preaching in India for 30-40 years? Is it that when Prabhupada went to America, the land of the impure, then he became pure? No. Purity is the force, but is purity the only force? No, other factors are also important. That, yes, we have to be pure, but also people have to be receptive, isn't it? So, most of us, based on our particular understanding or inspiration or experience in life, we gravitate towards one factor. Now, why is my preaching successful? Because my sadhana is very strict. But then somebody may be doing very strict sadhana and still they deviate from spiritual life. So spiritual life cannot be reduced to any one formula. That somebody may study Shastra very much and based on that, Shastric conviction is very great. But through their Shastric study, they may get questions if they don't get answers, and then they may go away from Krishna consciousness because of that. So in general, it is Bahumulik Nyaya. So when I am talking GOLD, it is when that spiritual awakening occurs, each of these contributes to spiritual awakening. Now, how much it contributes, that will vary from different people, for different people. So G is grace. Grace is the mercy of the Lord. Now, I am specifically using the word grace. Many times, there are many concepts that are non-translatable from one language to another. So grace and mercy, we may often use it interchangeably, but they are not the same. Mercy is generally when somebody is supposed to suffer and their suffering is decreased. Like a criminal may make a mercy petition to the court or mercy petition to the president of the country. Whereas, so mercy is something bad that we are meant to get, that is decreased. So please have mercy on me. Whereas grace is where something good we are meant to get, we get more than that. So mercy is reduce the negative, grace is increase the positive. So while both senses, so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said Mahamadanyaya. So that Mahamadanyaya primarily refers to grace. Although it can refer to mercy also. The mercy is that Dina Hina Yata Chila, Hariname Uddarila. That is giving to everyone, those who don't deserve it also, very sinful. But then the grace is Anarpita Charim Chirat Karunaya Avtirna Kalau. So that which is not at all being given, that which is very, very rare, so that is being given. So now what is when spiritual awakening happens, there is the element of grace. Krishna is acting. Krishna is merciful. Now, when this point comes up, we may say then those who don't awaken spiritually, is Krishna not merciful to them? Is Krishna not giving the grace to them? Prabhupada has composed a beautiful prayer called Markine Bhagavad Dharma. So I recently wrote a book on those prayers. So Tomara Ichhaya Sabha Hoy Mayavash, Tomara Ichhaya Nasha Mayara Parash. So Prabhupada says, by your arrangement, everyone falls to Maya's enticement. And it is by your benediction that everyone comes out of illusion. So now, Tomara Ichha here doesn't mean Krishna wants to put someone into illusion. Or Ichha does not mean that Krishna doesn't want somebody to come out of illusion. So the word Ichha refers more to sanction or permission rather than intention. So, but the point is, Krishna's grace is available for everyone. Does Krishna specially intervene to give grace to some people? Yes, that's possible. But while Krishna's grace is the final factor, it is not the sole factor. Because if Krishna's grace were the sole factor, then Krishna would become discriminatory. That this person didn't awaken spiritually, this person awakened spiritually. Why? It's Krishna's mercy. So then that would put the whole onus on Krishna. And that's not right. So grace is a very important factor. Now we may call it mercy, Brahmanda Brahmite, Kona bhagyamana jeev, bhagyamana jeev. So now after that comes orientation. Now this orientation comes from previous lives. So this is, if somebody has already practiced some spirituality, then the likelihood that in this life they will have a spiritual awakening is much more. Is much more. So in general, if you see, the Bhagavatam does focuses on these dramatic moments of awakening. If we consider the story of Rudrasura. See, Gajendra here does not have any association telling him, oh, chant Hare Krishna, chant Hare Krishna. Doesn't have anything like that. Even Rudrasura, he is on a battlefield. And suddenly for him that awakening occurs. Pingla also, she is just doing her job and one day no customers come and she gets frustrated. And through that frustration, that awakening comes. So the Bhagavatam depicts these stories where awakening seems to happen almost mysteriously. So there is an orientation from previous lives. So Vritrasura was also Chitraketu in a previous life. So if some people seem to take up spiritual life very rapidly and they seem to be much more serious, much more dedicated, it is quite likely that they may have had orientation from their previous life. And now beyond that, so now if you consider among these four factors that I discussed, is grace in our control? No, that is Krishna's control completely. What about orientation? That is also not in our control. Some people have more spiritual orientation, some people have less spiritual orientation. That's how we are from previous lives. Now, the third factor is a combination. It's loss plus learning. That everybody experiences loss in life, but not everybody learns from that loss. So loss could be somebody may lose a loved one, loss could be somebody may lose somebody may lose wealth, somebody may lose their reputation. So we have the story of the Avanti Brahmana. He lost everything, and at that time when he had lost everything, that's when he learned, okay, Manah Param Karanam Mamananti. It is the mind that is the cause of everything. And then he turned and took shelter of the Lord. So now in moments of loss, what determines whether the learning will happen? Now that could be the grace, that could be the orientation, but that is where association comes in. That is where knowledge comes in. So this, in one sense, when we are going through life, we are in one sense trying to learn all the time. But it is at the times of loss that learning registers. That it is Krishna that is really important. It is Krishna that matters the most. That, when do we recognize that? That is generally when we experience some terrible loss. So loss comes to everyone, but at that time whether we have that learning, so that makes a big difference. About 5-6 years, or 2020, just before the pandemic started, I was in America, and I had come to Chicago airport. One devotee came to pick me up, so I came by wheelchair, and I gave him my backpack, and then we went to the car, and we were packing the luggage. And I asked him, where's my backpack? He says, I don't know what backpack. He said, I gave it to you. He said, no, you didn't give anything to me. So I kept it right next to him, but he didn't realize it. He was talking with me, and normally I keep my passport in my pocket, but that day somehow I kept my passport in the backpack. And to be trapped abroad without a passport, it is chaotic. And I was there in Chicago for 3 days, and I had to travel abroad, and it was just panic at that time. What do you do? I was feeling so agitated, and on one side I was angry with myself. Okay, why did I tell him that this is the bag? I thought I obviously kept it in front of him, but he was looking at me sometimes. So sometimes devotees are so anxious to offer obeisances, they don't even, Deshikala Patra, they don't see at all. In the middle of the road, they offer obeisances. In the West, almost all devotees are told, don't offer obeisances in public. Because what happens is that in America, there's a lot of consciousness of racial discrimination. And previously, there was slavery. And slaves were expected to bow down to their masters. So publicly bowing down, it is almost treated as if you are being made into a slave. So the idea is that there are many reasons, but publicly it doesn't. The perception is very negative. But the point is that whatever I was beating myself, and then why did I keep my passport over there? So somehow at that time I was feeling agitated, very agitated. So then my go-to is the Bhagavad Gita's verses. So I started reading some Gita verses and I started feeling a little calmer. And then what do? Then I remembered there's one devotee who has a contact in the American embassy. Then he called here in New York, from New York he called the Chicago embassy. And the Chicago embassy worked things out. And 3 days I got a new passport. So it was quite difficult, but it worked out. But the point was that till that remembrance came, I was in much greater anxiety. So that loss happens, but in the loss, there is some learning. Now learning could be practical, but the practical intelligence came after the philosophical intelligence. Okay, remember Krishna. Then dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamupayanti te. So for us in many ways, our regular remembrance of Krishna that we are doing, anushikshitam, that is to help us remember Krishna at that time of crisis. And now the last part is that particular decision we make in the moment. Now that decision can come from the practice. But so spiritual awakening, is it something which is it something dependent on Krishna? So the loss and learning, when loss is going to come in our life, we don't know. How much learning we are going to have, that also we can't control. But the decision, Krishna, I am going to turn towards you. Krishna, I want to remember you. So that decision needs to be consciously made. And sometimes it may be, we can do very little. Somebody may be so sick, they can't really change their health. But in the health, do I remember, oh, how sick I am and I feel miserable? Or do I remember, okay, I still have, even if I don't have good health, I have so many other things in my life which are right for me, which Krishna has arranged for me. So that decision, when loss happens, whether I will be resentful. Why is this happening? Or I'll be resourceful. So in many ways we talk about the philosophy of karma and why do bad things happen to good people. So we often give the answer is because of karma. It's interesting that the Bhagavatam does not emphasize karma so much, neither the Mahabharata also. It doesn't go into, although Krishna is there with Arjuna on the Bhagavad Gita, when the Bhagavad Gita is spoken, and Krishna says, I remember our past lives, Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tavacha Arjuna. But he doesn't give Arjuna any backflash of any flashback rather, a flashback of a previous life, saying that, oh, you were so and so and Bhishma was so and so and Drona was so and they did this and you did this then, and that's why you are fighting now. So in general, the scriptures focus is not on answering the question why. Why do bad things happen to good people? The focus of scripture is on the question how. When bad things happen to good people, how do good people act? So there is no description of Parikshit Maharaj having done some karma in the past, because of which he was cursed. And in fact, even Parikshit Maharaj, when he meets the sages in the last chapter, 19th chapter of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, he doesn't ask any of them, why did this happen to me? So rather than being resentful, oh, why did this happen to me? He's resourceful, he's grateful that, okay, now that my death is coming upon me, I'm grateful that you are here with me. Please guide me how I should move ahead. So ultimately, we can't control what is going to happen in our life, but that decision, whether I want to turn toward Krishna or I want to feel sorry for myself, I want to blame others, I want to beat myself up, I want to do anything other than turning to Krishna, that is a decision that is always for us to take, that is in our control. And that brings me to the last part, the takeaway for us. The takeaway is that Krishna consciousness is, in one sense, a moment to moment choice. So some moments are obviously more important. Say, if we are giving a class to 1,000 people, at that time to be attentive, okay, how do I speak? How do I remember Krishna? How do I help others remember Krishna? Those moments will have much more consequence in terms of our service in this world. But when we are alone, when nobody is watching us, at that moment also, whether I am remembering Krishna or not, that may not drastically change my service. But that moment will also shape my consciousness. And it may shape my consciousness as much as when I am in public. So the idea is Krishna consciousness is a moment to moment choice. And that decision, when we make each moment, we try to be as Krishna conscious as we can. That does not necessarily mean we are frantically thinking every moment I have to be chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. No, try to be Krishna conscious, whatever way it may be. Okay, I am with this devotee, how can I serve this devotee? I am doing this, what can I learn? How is Krishna showing up now in my life? What is Krishna teaching me over here? So that attitude if we have, then this moment to moment, some moments may be materially significant, some moments may be materially, I don't want to use the word insignificant, I'll use the word non-significant. So insignificant means they have no importance at all. Non-significant means they don't seem important for us. But every moment is spiritually significant. Every moment that we are remembering Krishna, that is shaping our consciousness. That is preparing us for those moments when we face loss and our learning will be tested. And for Gajendra, the previous life's learning manifested when there was loss. When there's complete loss of power, that's the time when his previous life's learning manifested. And he turned towards the Lord, offered prayers, and then the Lord offered him his shelter. So I'll summarize. I discussed the topic, how spiritual awakening occurs. And in that, I discussed 3 main points. What is the acronym you remember? C was context. So we discussed Gajendra's journey from being materially powerful to materially powerless to becoming spiritually powerful. So materially powerful, materially powerless. And then what our interest was that spiritual awakening, it seems to happening very suddenly for him. So how does the spiritual awakening occur? So within this spiritual awakening that occurs, we discussed the verse and we discussed how when we are in anxiety, the best situation is when we know the cause and we know the cure. At the least anxiety, but we can't always get there. The worst is when we know neither. So bad is if we know the cause but don't know the cure. At least good is. So Gajendra came over here, and now in many cases the specific cause of the problem we are facing we may not know, and that's why the specific cure we do not know. But if we know the ultimate cure and we hold on to that ultimate cure, then that tadami buddhi yogam tam, then some intelligence about the cure will also come. Then immediate practice. Then I talked about GOLD, that this is all multi-factor. That awakening occurs, it is not due to one cause, multiple causes. So what was G? Grace. So this is the ultimate cause, but it is not the sole cause. Has to be present always. Then O was orientation. That is purvabhyasinate naiva riyate yavashopisa. So now these are not in our control. The L was loss plus learning. So loss everyone faces in life, and what they do during loss. Some people, when they lose something, the solution is just drink. Solution to every problem is there at the bottom of a bottle of alcohol. Well, the only solution is there, and you lose all solutions. You make things worse. But that's sattva, rajas, tamas, whatever there. Based on our learning, we will face loss. But moments of loss can be in one sense, the moments of test for us. And then last was the decision that we make. So all these 4 factors contribute in different ways. and we discussed how during the loss of, for Gajendra or for Dhritarashtra or for Pingala, there was awakening that happened. And the takeaway was, for us Krishna consciousness, it is moment to moment choice, moment to moment decision. So now we need to value the moments which are materially significant, and naturally we will be enthusiastic at those times. But even though that are non-significant materially, they are still important, because during those moments we are shaping our orientation. We are striving to turn towards Krishna. There is always spiritual significance in each moment. And in that way, through every moment, we can be moving closer towards Krishna, even if the awakening doesn't seem to be happening through that moment, but it will happen at its own time. Now we may see we are all spiritually awakened, but there's much more awakening to do. It's an ongoing process for us. So that awakening will happen at particular moments, but we can be laying the ground for it through the decisions that we take moment to moment. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Is there any quick question before we stop?
Can you kindly explain? So this gold, I understood, but last was learning element. I just little bit. I don't know. I understand.
Okay. So the question is that let me explain this. The Lord's mercy is always there. Now the orientation from the past, that is also there. It's dormant, but it is there. The Lord's mercy, grace is potent, and it is always there. The orientation is dormant, and it is also there. But when does that orientation awaken? See, from orientation to action. Like somebody may have interest in music, but when they do actually start learning music. For many people in their life, maybe people do a midlife career switch they do. I was here, but I want to do that. So I always had interest in art, but I didn't think I could earn a living through my art. So now I'm doing this. That orientation might be there. Now that is, of course, we can say material talent and material orientation. We are talking about spiritual orientation. But the point is, orientation may be there, but does the orientation always lead to action? Now that's why it is said that if somebody is born in a spiritual family, that dhimatam athava yoginam eva kule bhavati dhimatam, then that orientation gets an environment for action immediately. But from that orientation, when does the action happen? When does the choice happen? When does the decision happen? Now for a child, the parents are making the decision, but the child also has to make the decision sometime or the other. So generally, that orientation leads to some action most of the times in the situation of loss based on what is our learning. So now, for example, let's take two distinct examples. I know two devotees, both born in devotee families, first generation. Now, one of the fact that Prabhupada so spectacularly spread Krishna consciousness is a remarkable history. Now, one of the biggest, we could say, failures of our first generation was that very few of the children of our first generation devotees became devotees. Very, very few. And there are many reasons for that. One of the things was that we focused too much on missionary work. And the parents were there for the world, but the parents were not there for the children. And many children felt neglected, and they were sent to Gurukuls and things were not good over there. Many reasons were there. But the point is that I'm talking about two devotees. As one devotee, both of them were interested in music. I have talked with both of them. So one of them, generally, see, for those who are born in devotee families, we may think if I was born in a devotee family, life would have been so much better. It's possible. Krishna has a plan for everyone and things move according to his plan. For many people who are born in devotee families, when they come to teenage and youth, that is the time they rebel. Everybody rebels a little bit. And maybe for us in our youthful rebellion, we went against our environment and came to Krishna. Now, often for those who are born in devotee family, they go against the environment and go away from Krishna. So there is two devotees. One boy, he was very much into music. And he said, there is so much restriction for me that, my parents say you should only hear kirtan, but I love music. And then he went to he defied his parents and he went to some event of some rock star. some very famous musician. He paid a lot of money, went through a lot of crowd, and everybody was cheering and dancing and singing. And at that time, he said, I was imitating them and it struck me, this is just noise. What is there in this music? There's nothing here. The simple daily kirtan in the temple is sweeter. That's better. So, at that time, now in one sense it was not loss, he had achieved something. What he wanted to do, I want to go for a music concert, for a mundane music concert. But at that time, the expected enjoyment was there and the enjoyment did come. So the loss of that enjoyment, now from that, he didn't think, okay, he could have, he thought, oh, that learning, I have a memory of my kirtans from the past. And they are sweeter, they are so better. Now he has become a big kirtanier. So he had that time when he went away from bhakti, but then he came back. Now, there's another kid. So for him, he also had a lot of interest in music. And then he was born in the Western family, and then there are Western classical instruments also. There's Western classic, not all Western music is like break dance and noisy kind of music. There's Western classical music also. So he became interested in that, and he went for a concert for that. And then he felt that this is so soothing, so calming. This is the best experience I have had. And then he became inspired to synthesize that Western musical form with more devotional, more spiritual kind of vibes. Now that time ISKCON was very rigid and conservative, and they said, you cannot use these instruments. Now we have traditional forms of singing. So then he left ISKCON. Now he's still a Gaudiya Vaishnava, he's associated with some Gaudiya Math, and he has become the pioneer of integrating like Western music with you could say bhakti motifs, bhakti themes. Now we lost him. Now devotees are trying to get him back and connect him with ISKCON. So there is some issue about what all musical instruments can we use, what all musical forms we can use. There's some, because of organizational issue, there are debates. But the point is that in that moment of loss, that what is the learning that somebody takes? It depends from person to person. I'm not saying the first was good and the second was bad. Both of them were searching and learning and exploring. So in the moment of loss, based on what we have internalized, so we will move in that direction. That's why many times when parents ask, now should we push our devotees to children to chant? So, yeah.
Because I am asking this question,
Okay.
you came to the point. So I asked you because loss is very clear, it's all for a clear. Because I am not able to understand the difference between orientation and learning. Because learning means like in the moment of loss,
Okay.
how we act based on the past learning, how is it that different from the orientation is my question. Is it not repeating that? I just felt confused.
Okay, that's a good point. So, thank you for clarifying. I'll also clarify specifically. See, when I use the word orientation, I use it in singular. But within us, it need not be there's only one orientation. Somebody may have interest in music, somebody may have interest in bhakti. Now, can the interest in music and bhakti go together? So in the first case, this person did not really have interest in any specific form of music. So when he was introduced to this rock music, he felt this is just noise. So that was not so much of an orientation, but that was more of a outside in desire because of the peer pressure and the culture of the world. So then the orientation towards bhakti, it won over. That is, okay, bhakti music is better. Now somebody may have, so that's why when we talk about orientations, there is a spiritual orientation towards Krishna, but there is also a material orientation towards particular things. And that also needs to be accommodated. So now, when in the moments of loss, based on our learning, some people may have one orientation, they may choose that. Some people may have multiple orientations. Which is more important for me at that time? So that is something they will choose. So it's like, some devotee might have been a very vigorous preacher, and then in the face of preaching, they experience some loss. Maybe there's some controversy comes up, some false accusations come up. I know one devotee, it happened with him. And then he decided, I don't want to be a preacher. This is not what I'm meant to do. Now he has started his own farm and he is raising he's a senior brahmachari preacher I know. But he said, I did this as a service to my spiritual master. But who I am, what I really want to do in my life, I want a more peaceful life. I don't just want to talk about Krishna. I want to feel close to Krishna. And through nature I feel close to Krishna. Now he is developing a small project. He was a much bigger preacher earlier. But when you meet with him, he's much more peaceful, he's much happier. And I talked with the spiritual master also. Spiritual master said, that I want ultimately him to be happy. So when he's Krishna conscious and he's happy, that's good. So sometimes in loss, when we talk about learning is not just about turning towards Krishna, about how to turn towards Krishna also. So that's why I said spiritual awakening is an ongoing process. It's not just a one-time coming to Krishna. Like sometimes we have these romantic movies where how the boy and the girl meet and they overcome obstacles and then they lived happily ever after. So for many of us, we often tell stories of how I came to Krishna consciousness. So that is like a spiritual version of happily ever after. Now there is no happily ever after in this world. So even after we come to Krishna, so our coming to Krishna is, you could say, the first level of spiritual awakening. But after that also, how do I continue serving Krishna? That is also a matter of spiritual awakening. And that has to keep happening. And so it happens in different ways at different times for devotees. So for some devotees there are dramatic changes. Like one devotee from college preacher might become a farm cultivator or whatever like that. Not exactly farmer, a farm community cultivator or whatever. But for some people it might happen more subtly. Yeah, I'll be in college outreach, but I would like to focus more on not so much on new people, but people who are already there. I will take them further. Let others take new people. Like, I will be in fundraising, but I just don't want to focus on this kind of people. I want to focus on this kind of people. Maybe not just people who are pious. I want wealthy people who are also intellectual. I want to cultivate them, whatever. So that, in one sense, that sharpening or refining of our focus. So it almost always happens when there is a loss. So in the moment of loss, there is that, in one sense, learning more about ourselves, learning more about how Krishna has made me to serve him. So we are all meant to serve Krishna, but when we are serving according to our nature, sometimes some people that's being visible, just do what your authorities are telling you. But serving according to our nature, ultimately our nature is also come from Krishna. We say it's because of our past karma, that is true. But our past karma also works under Krishna. So maya adhyakshena prakriti. So if I am made in a particular way, I am meant to serve Krishna in a particular way accordingly. So understanding what gifts Krishna has given me, what interests Krishna has given me, and how I can use those interests and gifts in Krishna's service. So that is also the learning I am talking about over here. Is it clear still? Okay. So thank you very much. Grantaraj Vijaywada Bhagavatam ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Jai Gaur Premanande.
This Grace Chaitanya Prabhu ki. Hare Krishna. Actually, I did not give introduction of Prabhuji because while coming I asked multiple devotees. They everyone is all Prabhu, we are already so the best thing. But still I want to do small